Your premier source for South Louisiana sports. Welcome into the American Sports Podcast. Now here's your host, BD.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Week 9 episode of American Sports Podcast. For you this week, I have a great interview with 2020 NFL Draft prospect Cajuns wide receiver Ja'Marcus Bradley, and I discuss the return of sports and how it could look and what impact it could have. All of that along with an interesting question segment and a Louisiana sports recap. But first, a word from our sponsor.
The American Sports Podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors. Sola Safety. Sola Safety becomes part of your management staff and helps you complete the tasks necessary to have a robust safety management system so that you can focus on production. Now more than ever, executives, business owners, and organizational leaders are trying to stretch their dollars, maximize their people power, and create long-term sustainable results for their companies. Program development and implementation is our business. Let us help you implement a safety management system which will enable your organization to compliance. Contact Sola Safety at 337-210-3352. 337-210-3352. Plus one.
My guest this week on Plus One was Louisiana's top receiving target in 2019, finishing the year with 906 receiving yards on 60 receptions and 10 touchdowns, earned second-team All-Sun Belt and first-team All-Louisiana honors. He notched his second straight season with 10 touchdowns, the first player in program history to do so, finished his career with 23 touchdowns, the second most in the Raging Cajun career, amassed 2,359 career receiving yards, good for fourth all-time. He brought in 2 touchdowns in the team's Cajun-filled opener against Liberty on September 7th, brought in a career-long 74-yard reception against ULM on November 30th. He notched his second 2-touchdown performance against Miami, Ohio in the Lending Tree Bowl, and finished the year with at least 1 touchdown grab in the final 4 games. He also finished the year with 100-yard games against Liberty and ULM. Cajuns wide receiver and 2020 NFL Draft prospect Ja'Marcus Bradley is on the line. Ja'Marcus, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for reaching out.
So I know we're living in some weird times right now with the whole coronavirus pandemic going on and everything. I'm curious, how are you dealing with all this? Where are you quarantining at, and how has it affected your daily life?
I'm staying in Lafayette. I'm still on my lease at school. So my day pretty much is every day from 10:30 to 12. I go and work out with some teammates and my strength coach, and then after that, it's up for grabs.
That's pretty interesting. You're still getting together with some teammates to work out. I'm sure this is kind of a weird time, especially since you're in an off season where you're not coming back for a college season. You're kind of preparing for the next chapter. I really want to talk about your time as a Cajun, though. It's been fun to watch you play. I think my favorite play from you this past season was the second touchdown you scored in the Lending Tree Bowl. I love a perfectly timed play that you can kind of see the practice and the effort that goes into it. And your second touchdown came on a red zone tunnel screen. Can you talk about that game specifically for a second, and also your favorite moment from your Cajuns career?
Yeah, that game was really fun. It took us a little minute to get going, but after we got going, it was a lot of fun. And I would say that's my best memory because that's the first time we won something since I've been there. And when we first got there, our class of 15 said we was going to win something before we left. And that night we did it.
So I'm kind of curious to how your recruiting process went with UL, and in general. I know you're right here. You're from our neighboring state of Mississippi, so the proximity, I'm sure, played a role in it. But when you decided to come to UL, I know you visited some other schools. I believe Cal was one of them, if I'm not mistaken. How was that recruiting by the administration at the time, and what was the main decision in you choosing the Cajuns?
Recruiting was really good. I had already had a player from my high school to Forest. Me and him played together. So it was sort of a connection there. And the reason I chose to come to UL is because it was the closest offer I had. And I wanted my family to get a chance to see me play.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I figured that was kind of the biggest proximity. The biggest reason was proximity to your home. Um, and now that you're looking at the next phase of your life, who knows where you'll end up. But I'm sure as college is going on, as you've gotten over, you're matured, and having your family watch you play has probably been a treat. So I doubt you ever thought that you'd be preparing for the next phase of your life post college, with yours most likely being a career in the NFL, having to do so remotely because of the coronavirus stuff. Normally you'd be, possibly meeting with teams face to face and having interviews and whatnot, but now we're all somewhat segregated from the rest of the world in a way. How are you dealing with preparing for the draft and your future as a football player amidst the pandemic?
Just taking it one day at a time, working out, trying to stay in shape, being ready for that call. And I've been in contact with some teams, did some FaceTime interviews and texting, so everything is still looking good.
So, would you be able to tell me, have you hired an agent yet?
Yes, sir.
And,
My agent is named Martin Fishman.
and then, what teams have you come in contact with? Have you come in contact with any local teams, or are they? Did you say the Texans?
The Texans texted me the other day. I was talking with the Panthers, the Jets, the Rams, and the Titans text me. It's a good bit of teams I've been in contact with.
That's got to be a pretty exciting process, even though it's not a normal process for someone in your usual situation with the pandemic going on. So we've kind of talked about your recruiting process, but I'm also curious how this pre-draft process is going. And when I say that, I mean, are you having any workouts besides the workouts with your teammates? Like, are there any pro days or anything like that? Are you making videos to send to teams besides just speaking to them through text or FaceTime?
Me and Kevin did a little pro day type thing last week. So I ran my 40 and I did my broad, and I sent them in because the big question was with me was what is he going to run in the 40? So my emphasis was just getting that 40 video into every team.
What did you run in that video that you made?
4.48.
Okay, that's pretty good. So something I like to do with athletes when I speak to them is give them their air quotes strength and weaknesses as stated by scouts. So I kind of did some research going into the draft. There are the strengths and the weaknesses that NFL scouts see on your tape or see when they come to visit you in person. The strengths are obviously all very good. I agree with all of them. When you watch your tape, I want you to comment and give me your take on the weaknesses. So let me know how you would convince a scout or a coach that these aren't true. I'll read the strengths first, then I'll read the weaknesses one by one and give you a chance to reply after each. So the strengths I have are smooth, gliding strides around the field. Your routes are unpolished, but your movements have rhythm to them. Your downfield acceleration creeps up on cornerbacks, tight cuts on slants and crossing routes. You got foot quickness for natural separation. Your ball skills outshine those of your opponent. You're a high point winner with excellent midair adjustment. You create late separation for sudden catch space, and you offer kick return potential. Would you have return kicks in your college career? So those are all very good strengths to have, especially at a person in your position, a wide receiver. Now, some of the weaknesses, I'll read them one by one. You tell me what you think. So the first one here that they have listed is that you need schooling for quicker release against the press.
I feel like I do a good job against the press, but it's always room for improvement. So,
all right. So the second one I got here, you get crowded into boundaries on outside release.
That goes back to the press release. So, I'm normally a single or a double, so I think I should open up my release release package. So,
Yeah, and I don't necessarily agree with that one either because I've watched a lot of your tape, and I think you have some of the footwork and your body control allows you to get out of that out of those crowded fields that you might get yourself into on the outside release. So the next one I got is a nonchalant field demeanor could work against you on the next level. I do see you personally being, and I'll give you a chance to answer, but I do see you personally being like a mild mannered person, but I don't think that'll work against you.
yeah, I don't think it'll work against me. I'm always calm, cool, and collected. So I don't I don't get that.
So the next one I have is needs to attack routes with consistent play speed. I don't know what they're getting at here. I've seen nothing but consistency from you with your play speed.
Yeah, I don't know if they getting that with that one either. The big thing is at our school is you can be tired after the whistle, just don't be tired in between the whistle. That's something I'm big on. So I feel like I play every play with the same speed. So I'm willing to learn what they talking about though.
So the next one here I have is hasn't run a very diverse route tree.
That's true. Uh, my position it was mostly a go route or a slant, and sometimes we ran dig. So, but I can run all the routes and I practice them with my coach. I feel very confident and smooth with all my routes. But that was just the offense that I was in. And my position, we didn't run that many routes. It was either a go, a hitch, or a slant.
So the last one that I have here is the one that kind of jabbed at me the most, and it's not even aimed at me, but I just felt like this one's way off course. Is half-hearted effort to handle run blocking chores. I felt like I've seen nothing but the utmost effort. I mean, you even have a reputation with the UL football program of if you're not doing it the Jamarcus way, then you're not doing it the right way.
Yes, sir. Now, I don't know where that one came from because I love going in there and cracking back on the safeties and opening up for either Ray, Trey, or Eli. So, and I don't never do anything half-hearted. So they got that one completely wrong.
Yeah, so I've done this before with other athletes and sometimes in just personal conversations with people, and really and truly I agree with you. I don't see any of these weaknesses being 100% true except for maybe the route tree run, like you said, and so you and I agree on there. But that being said, what is the one thing that you think you can improve on, the main thing you want to improve on heading into the next phase of your football career?
You talking about from the weakness list?
All right, just in general.
Uh, I really want to open up my release package and be more dominant in the block.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would, of course, suit you at the next level. The NFL is a faster game, a more I don't want to use the word violent, a more physical game than the college game. So I think that's a good thing to want to improve on. So the next thing I want to ask you is I want the fans and possibly anybody listening to this um, that could use it for your future. I want them to get to know you better a little bit personally. So let's discuss some personal stuff. I'm going to rattle these off to you and you answer. What's your favorite food?
Favorite food? Probably chicken strips. I
Chicken
eat it
strip.
so much.
You got a favorite fast food chicken strip?
Uh, this place called Stevens in Lafayette.
Stevens. Okay. What's your favorite genre of music?
Uh, hip hop, R&B.
Who's your favorite hip hop R&B artist?
That's that. It depends on what type of mood I'm in. I like old school type music too. So I listen to Nas and all of them, and I don't know. It just depends on what type of mood I'm in.
Okay. What's your favorite place you've ever been on vacation?
Favorite place I've been on vacation. I haven't taken that many trips.
So, okay, how about this one then? What's the one place you wish you could visit? What's the one place you want to vacation?
Bali.
Bali, okay. What's your favorite subject in school?
Favorite subject in school. Math.
Math?
Nah.
Man, that's my least favorite. How about some sports teams? What's your favorite sports teams in the NBA, the NFL, and baseball?
I don't have any favorite sports teams.
All right. Well, who's the one team?
I was that player that just like to play. I'm not too big on watching it.
Okay. Who's the one team that you kind of rooted for growing up in the NFL, or like your dream team that you could play for in the NFL?
I don't have one of those either.
What about your I want to know what you'd be doing your job. Your major is sports management, correct?
Yes, sir.
So what's the one job you would like to have if you weren't a football player?
Probably coaching or something that deals with sports.
Okay. I figured there would be something along those lines with your major, maybe an agent or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ja'Marcus, I know you're a busy man. You've got a lot going on with this offseason. I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, man. I appreciate the time you've given me today. I wish you nothing but luck in the upcoming draft and your future. I can't wait to see you playing on Sundays. Hopefully, we can catch up again after you're wearing an NFL jersey.
Okay. Thank you for reaching out.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too.
National sports.
So I want to talk a little bit about where we are in regards to sports with the pandemic. I know it's beating a dead horse, but I think we are slowly reaching a point where the talk of the major pro leagues in our country are returning is going on. The talk is going on. And while publicly the NFL, let's start with the NFL. While publicly the NFL is committed to playing the 2020 season beginning in September to stadiums full of fans as they normally would, the NFL has also been contemplating contingencies. Contingencies that include a potentially shortened schedule, that may include holding games in empty or partially filled stadiums, and possibly even moving or rescheduling games if necessary. So, the very notion of the cautious return of professional sports has gained some significant momentum as of late. And that momentum has even included talks within the White House of the possibility of sports returning as soon as possible. And I think it's important to realize that sports, while not necessary, are important to our country. The very revenue, taxes, and the mere boost to the tourism, among other stimulants that go into the economies around the country, are so important. So there has to be a solution to begin the process of sports returning to jumpstart that stimulant. Now, obviously, the country as a whole and the states are still shut down. So I don't know the correct solution to start the return of sports. I don't know if it'll be a 1/3 filled stadiums, a half filled stadiums, or something along those lines. But getting back to the NFL has said that it is planning for everything from playing without fans to playing in full stadiums. So a broad spectrum. And if you're watching the daily White House briefings like I am, you will see that there is a push from the federal government to open things up. On Wednesday, we saw the nation's top infectious disease scientist give a public but highly contingent blessing to the return of sports, and that is Dr. Anthony Fauci. Okay, we see him on TV every single day. He's the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. He outlined his personal opinion and outlined a plan that could allow the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball to resume play, all the leagues that are currently suspended. And it would involve playing in empty stadiums with players and other essential personnel kept in basically a hypothetical protective bubble, if you will. All right, something that would involve like frequent testing and as much self-isolation as possible. Dr. Fauci's comments were released on the same day that President Trump, who on several occasions has made clear his preference for sports to return as soon as possible, held a second conference call in 2 weeks with the commissioners of the country's major sports leagues. Several team owners, including Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys, Mark Cuban of the Dallas Mavericks, were on that call. So, until this week, the NFL had basically appeared content to stick to its public stance of an undisturbed 2020 season, while quietly considering other scenarios and allowing the other leagues, with seasons that are currently on pause, to show the way, to pave the path, right? But now even the NFL seems to be planning for the possibility of a disruption to its season. This is a nightmare for us, right? Football is the number one thing in regards to sports that happens in this country. I do think, personally, that the other leagues will have to go first, right? We're not going to see all these leagues continue to be suspended or cancel those seasons outright, and then the NFL just start its season or its preseason like nothing ever happened in August, okay? Major League Baseball, National Basketball Association, the National Hockey League, they all have to go first. And then there's the notion that the league could have to deal with ongoing lockdowns or stay-at-home orders in specific states, okay? So with some local government officials already having warned that a too soon return of sports could have catastrophic ramifications, it creates a logistical nightmare for the NFL. All right. President Trump has already stated that he wants the governors and the mayors of states and cities to decide when to return. So that logistical nightmare comes at the front of everything. It might eventually become necessary to consider even moving games or adjusting the schedule if games cannot be played in certain cities at certain points during the season. And there's no way of really knowing which states will be open and which won't. The logistical nightmare is not even only just moving games, but it's, are there other events going on at the same time in these arenas and stadiums? Are there other events going on in the cities? That type of thing. Okay. Then you throw in weather. You know, will storms come into play? Will hurricanes come into play later in the season? We've had, the NFL's had to move games before because of that type of stuff. So the logistical nightmare is just catastrophic. It's beyond measure. I hope that widespread testing for the virus will be available by the fall for players, perhaps fans, and then we just urge older and other at-risk fans to remain at home and not go to the games, right? Not go to events. The NFL schedule for the 2020 season is expected to be released around May 9th, which is in about 3 weeks or so, and reportedly, that schedule will account for the possibility of games being lost by a delayed start to the season. So I have been told by someone with knowledge of the schedule planning that the schedule is being done in such a way that builds in that flexibility for the season being delayed, the start of the season being delayed, and having to have a shortened season and lose some of those games. So essentially, the league has already had to be flexible by shutting down facilities, banning player travel and meetings. Free agency was an unprecedented. It was done in an unprecedented way this offseason. And now the NFL is doing a virtual segregated draft. So it's already been affected in a way. It's already been it's already had its season, the NFL calendar year, basically affected. So I don't see any way that it's not going to be completely affected in some way. I don't know if it's going to start on time, but at some point, the effects of the current state that we're in are going to be felt. All right. Unlike the NFL, the other major U.S. leagues were already in various stages of exploring their most likely paths to resuming play. All of it is basically based upon the continued advancements in testing for the virus and the fight against spreading it, the social distancing, banning certain travel, that type of thing. So Major League Baseball, which was in the middle of spring training and about 2 weeks shy of its opening day when the play was actually suspended, has already discussed a plan to stage games in the Phoenix area in Arizona using the Arizona Diamondbacks Chase Field and some spring training complexes. And as of today, Arizona only has roughly 4,000 confirmed cases and 100 deaths. Also, the governor of Arizona has already basically somewhat given his blessing to that plan. The NBA, which has roughly 65 games into their 82-game season when their play was suspended, has explored a similar plan using multiple arenas and practice facilities in the Las Vegas area. Las Vegas is also the place where the NBA holds its summer league. So the NBA was scheduled to have its pre-draft combine and lottery drawing in May, its draft in June, its free agency period beginning in July, and then the Las Vegas Summer League in mid-July. All of those events are now up in the air, basically pending the league's decision to resume or cancel the 2019-2020 season. So the NBA is kind of in the biggest pickle right now because Major League Baseball actually never started their season. It could just be delayed. But their schedule is really messed up. And then you throw in the willingness of all the parties included. Any efforts to restart sports leagues would require a degree of buy-in from not only teams and leagues and cities, but players. Especially those players with families, who by necessity would have to live in strict isolation, traveling only from their hotels to the stadiums or arenas, and submitted to frequent testing, basically putting themselves and their families at risk. And possibly only allowing immediate family and members of the organizations into the bubble, into that hypothetical bubble. That would greatly increase the number of people to account for and the number of regular tests that are required. Three-time American League MVP Mike Trout talked about this, earlier this week his wife is pregnant. She's due to give birth this coming summer, and he raised some of those issues, He did an interview with NBC Sports Network and said that there's a lot of flags, there's a lot of red flags, there's a lot of questions. But his mentality is that he, of course, wants the sports to come back. He wants to start the baseball season as soon as possible, but it's got to be a realistic, safe process to do so. I mean, that's just common sense. So the whole situation is it's a sticky situation. It's a situation that's hard to maneuver. I think as of right now, I foresee the NFL starting on time, the actual playing year anyway. You got training camps that'll start in July and August. You got the regular season that'll start in September. You're supposed to have a new NBA season that coincides with that starting sometime in October. So it's hard to imagine that the NBA will all out cancel its season, its current season anyway. Major League Baseball, I think, is going to start at some point. Just today, President Trump saying that he wants the country to reopen by May 1st. Whether you feel that's escalated or not, it just goes to show that I think sports are going to come back sooner rather than later. It's just going to be how they logistically accomplish the return and still be cautious enough not to hinder any progress we've made with spreading the virus or battling the virus.
Interesting question.
So I got a few questions this week. I picked one to answer just in regards to the essence of time. A buddy of mine who from the military is a big San Francisco 49ers fan. And his question is, who is the current favorite to win the NFC West in 2020? I went and did some research of the free agency period and how each team from the NFC West did. I went and did some research from the past few years and the moves that they made, coaching changes, player personnel changes, even some scouting changes that some other teams did. So I kind of did a really more in-depth research than I normally do for the interesting question segment. But when talking about football, it's really easy to kind of dive into something and go down a rabbit hole. But long story short, I think San Francisco is still the odds-on favorite to win the NFC West in 2020. They nearly knocked off Kansas City in last year's Super Bowl. The 49ers still have an elite defense, a very strong power run game, and Jimmy Garoppolo is still a solid quarterback, so I think they are currently favored. However, Arizona will likely be way more competitive against both the Seahawks and the Rams. I think that the Seahawks surprised many people by making the playoffs and nearly winning the division over the 49ers last year, but they are destined, in my opinion, to kind of fall back down to earth in 2020. They finished the year with a plus 7-point differential despite an 11-5 record, so they are a prime candidate for some regression. I don't think the Seahawks are going to be as good as they were in 2019 or 2020. The Cardinals have made the shrewdest move of the offseason so far when they acquired DeAndre Hopkins from the Texans. Hopkins has been a first-team All-Pro receiver in each of the past 3 seasons. It was a very stunning move that the Cardinals only needed to give up basically an injury-prone David Johnson and a 2020 second-round pick and make a 4th-round pick swap to land him. So his addition will immediately give Kyler Murray a true number 1 receiver, and Hopkins has the potential to post even better numbers in a very high prolific offense run by or designed by Cliff Kingsbury. Unlike last season when Arizona was one of the longest shots on the board to win the Super Bowl in its division, the Cardinals currently have a plus 700 odd to win the NFC West and are plus 5,000 to win the Super Bowl. So still not great odds, but I think they're going to be much, much better. I think it was all about growth in Arizona for 2019. The Cardinals had a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach in Murray and Kingsbury, but I think they managed to show some explosiveness and some promise for the future with an offense that finished in the middle of the pack in terms of yards and points. So I think they were a middle-of-the-road team, and they kind of just took some time to gel, some time to get comfortable towards the beginning of the season, and I think they take a big step up this coming season. Kyler Murray did show why he was taken number 1 overall in the 2019 draft, despite everyone saying that he's undersized. I think he completed somewhere around 65% of his passes for about 3,700 yards and 20 touchdowns. He only had 12 interceptions. He averaged 7 yards per attempt, even though Arizona played in the toughest division basically in football last year. So another year of development under Kingsbury should lead Kyler Murray being even better in 2020, and I think now he has some real weapons at the skill positions. And that starts with DeAndre Hopkins. It's a very big upgrade over what the Cardinals had last season. Basically, Larry Fitzgerald led the team in receiving with 75 receptions for 804 yards and 4 touchdowns. But he's that future Hall of Famer can no longer be expected to be their number 1 receiver. So DeAndre Hopkins is basically their number 1 receiver coming into camp, into the season, day 1. He's a huge upgrade. Additionally, it didn't really take long for Kingsbury to realize that Johnson wouldn't work in his system. He didn't get as many touches. They traded for Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds. Ended up being the season's 2 top running backs, and their agility is more in line with what Kingsbury's looking for in his basically modified air raid offense. So I think that Drake and Edmonds are going to be better in 2020 with more time in Kingsbury's system, and now David Johnson's in Houston. I think obviously still the biggest concern for the Cardinals is on defense. Aside from Chandler Jones and Patrick Peterson, there's really no playmakers on that side of the ball. Budda Baker has shown some potential at safety, but the biggest issues are in the front 7. They don't really have a very good offensive line or defensive line. Terrell Suggs played for the Cardinals for a while last year. He had the second most sacks despite being 37 years old. He had 5.5 sacks. So basically no other player aside from Jones finished with more than 3 sacks. Arizona also allowed a whopping 4.4 yards per carry on the ground. So the team is hoping that some free agent signings, they did sign Jordan Phillips and Devondre Campbell. They're hoping that they can take the first steps in correcting their defense, because I think that's their biggest issue right now. The Rams have had to part ways with numerous players in the offseason. Todd Gurley's, Clay Matthews were both released. The team really couldn't afford to keep Dante Fowler Jr. and Corey Littleton after splurging so much on contracts over the last few years. I think their cap situation is probably the worst in the league, right up there with Kansas City. But Kansas City has players on their roster to show for it, and the success to show for it, too, after winning a Super Bowl last year. So I think the Rams kind of saw that happen last year. They had a down year compared to being in the Super Bowl the year before. And I just think that their cap situation has forced them to now not be able to afford certain players. They were able to take some flyers on veterans like Leonard Floyd and Ashawn Robinson to keep that kind of formidable defense, but it just doesn't look like the Rams are the juggernaut that they were a couple years ago, and I think it's because it's a money problem. So, looking at the Rams, I think that they're still going to regress. I think the Cardinals will probably finish second in the division, with the Seahawks at third, with the Rams in fourth. And again, my favorite to win the NFC West is still San Francisco.
Louisiana Sports Recap.
This is your Louisiana Sports Recap. In the NFL, Carolina Panthers and Saints NFC South rival star running back Christian McCaffrey signed a 4-year, $64 million extension this week, making him the highest paid running back in league history. The New Orleans Saints have canceled the season ticket accounts identified as being broker seat accounts consistently sold to visiting fans that we have no chance to cancel. In an effort to make more tickets available to Saints fans, the Saints are offering those canceled season tickets to current season ticket holders before offering them to people on the waiting list. In the NBA, former Pelicans GM Dell Demps is reportedly the top candidate for the Chicago Bulls GM job. The New Orleans Pelicans are reportedly interested in Maccabi Tel Aviv guard Elijah Bryant of the EuroLeague. Bryant averaged 9.9 points per game and 8.4 assists per game in the EuroLeague this season. In college sports, Louisiana Raging Cajuns women's basketball forward Tyrion Doucette picks up all Louisiana honors, and Calvin Templin of the men's basketball team has entered the transfer portal. He averaged 3.2 points and 1.3 rebounds last season. Sharif O'Neal, the son of former Tiger star Shaquille O'Neal, officially signed with LSU on Wednesday after transferring from UCLA. He will follow in his father's footsteps. O'Neal was a 4-star Rivals.com recruit out of Crossroads High School in the Los Angeles area, where he averaged 27 points per game as a senior. He announced he was transferring from UCLA after just 13 games this season. The sophomore had averaged 2.2 points and 2.9 rebounds in just more than 10 minutes per game. This concludes your Louisiana Sports Recap. This concludes episode 9 of the American Sports Podcast. I am still offering free advertising through the month of May for any local businesses that may be affected by the virus pandemic going on. If you'd like more information, or you would like to submit a question to the Interesting Question segment, you can do so by direct messaging the Facebook page for American Sports Podcast, or email me at americansportspodcast2020@gmail.com. Tune in next week for episode 10, which will be all focused around the upcoming draft and who my top players on my board are for the New Orleans Saints. Have a great week, everyone, and thank you for tuning in.